Hi sewing friends, welcome back to my channel. I want to say a big welcome to all my new sewing friends and thank you to everyone for supporting me and my passion. If you're new here and you have not already joined our sewing family, please kindly go ahead to hit the subscribe button and don't forget to like this video as it helps my video reach more people. Also, leave a comment below and let's get the conversations going. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how I drafted a basic pant or trouser pattern. You can also use the pattern for shorts and you can change the pattern to fit whatever pants design you're going for. Now, with that said, let's get to the video. Before we start drafting, we need to take some measurements. First, we need to take our waist, hip, crotch, and the length of our pants or trousers. I will not be using my around thigh measurement as this pattern can be adjusted for a more form-fitting pair of pants. For the crotch, you can measure it by running the tape measure from the front of your waist through the legs to the back waist like I'm doing, or you can use a straight ruler and a square ruler, and while wearing a belt or some sort of rope around your waist, you sit down on a flat surface and measure the distance from the flat surface to your waist. I came up with 11.5 inches. We will also need to divide our waist and hip measurements into what is called waist arc and hip arc. This is how you get your waist and hip arc measurements. I also want to mention that I drafted this pattern using the book Pattern Drafting for Fashion Design by Helen Joseph Armstrong. I find this book to be one of the best out there when it comes to pattern drafting. So if you're interested, make sure to get your hands on this book because this book is really good. To draft the pattern, you will need a ruler, pencil, drafting paper, tape measure, curve ruler, square ruler, which is optional but I highly recommend it. I have gone ahead to square a line across the top of my drafting paper and have also squared a line down the middle of my paper. I mark the points where the lines intersect as A and I measure along the vertical line and mark my desired pant length as B, which is also the ankle. Next, I mark my crotch depth and label as D. I go ahead to mark my hip level and that is a third of the distance between A and D. I achieve this by marking the distance on a piece of paper and folding that into 3. One of those folds is a third of that distance. This method takes any math out and it saves my brain from that stress. Thank me later. I go ahead to mark the hip as C. Next, I find the midpoint between D and B. I fold my tape measure to find half of that distance. I mark that on the line and go up 1 inch from that mark and label as E. Next, I square the hip level and crotch depth lines horizontally. Next, I mark my front hip arc plus a 1/4 inch on the hip level, crotch depth, and the waist level. I did the same for the front using the front hip arc plus a 1/4 inch. Next, I went ahead to connect those marked points with a straight line on both sides. I also went ahead to label all my points. Feel free to label it however is best for you. I realized I didn't have enough space for my back crotch, so I attached a little bit of paper to enable me draft my pattern. Next, I went ahead to extend the back crotch line by half the distance of the back crotch line, which is 12 divided by 2, which is 6, and then I labeled that as well. Next, I also marked half the distance between the waist and crotch depth, still using my paper technique. I went ahead to do the same for the front pattern as well, and I measured the distance to make sure it is accurate. I went ahead to draw a straight line to connect the marks. I also extended the front crotch line by 1/4 of the total distance of the front crotch as you see me doing. To get 1/4 of the distance, I again measured the entire distance with my paper, and then I folded the paper into 4. One of those folds is 1/4 of the entire distance. I hope this helps with the fractions. I know it can be confusing. I went ahead to extend the line and label the point as well. Next, I move on to the waist, and from the mark point, I come in by 3/4 of an inch and mark a new point. From that point, I mark my waist arc and an additional 2¼ inches for that allowance, and then label them. From the label end, I come in at 3 inches and then 1 inch for the first dart, another 1 inch and 1/4 for spacing between the darts, and finally 1 inch for the second dart. Next, I find the middle point for the dart and draw 4½ inches dart lines toward the hip. For the front, I measure my front waist arc plus 1¼ inches. I also come in 3 inches, then 1/2 inch, another 1 inch and 1/4 for dart spacing, and finally another 1/2 inch. The 1/2 inches are the darts, hence I find the middle point again and extend the legs by 3 inches. Once done with that, I go back to the back pattern and extend that initial mark by 1/4 of an inch. This is the point end. Next, I draw a straight line from the top of the point to touch the crotch level, making sure to go through the midpoint I have labeled as X. Next, I draw a 2-inch diagonal line from point G. Use that as a guide to draw a curved line touching points X and I. Do this till you get the perfect curve. I label that point as T. Next, I do the same for the front at a distance of 1½ inches and connect the points like I'm doing. I also dropped the front waist by 1/4 of an inch and drew the rest of my dart legs. Next, I use a curved ruler to blend a curved line into the waist since the waist is not straight. And I do same for the front, connecting the mark on the waist to the point I marked earlier. I then use my curved ruler to connect the waist to the hip. Next, I go ahead to find the midpoint of the total crotch length plus an additional 1/4 inch for the back and for the front as well. This will also double as my green line. I then go ahead to draw in the green lines. Next, I measured in 1 inch both for the front and back crotch. Next, I move on to the knee and the ankle level. I went ahead to square lines opposite the middle line or the point E, which is the knee point, and I did same for the ankle level as well. I went ahead to extend the grain line on both the front and the back. Next, at the ankle level, I measure 4.5 inches away from the grain line on both the back and front patterns. With my longest ruler, I go ahead to connect the 1/2 inch pointer marked away from the end of the crotch to the point on the ankle like so. Then with my curved ruler, I drew a curved line and blended it into the straight line I just drew. I also went ahead to blend the other point on the ankle to the hip, and I went ahead to do the same for the other leg. So with this being a basic block, I wanted to make a pair of palazzo pants. So I further widened the ankle and made it 7 inches on each side of the leg, and I went ahead to connect to the crotch with straight lines using broken lines for now. Finally, I include my hem allowance, which is 1 inch, and I always angle the sides like this for easy turn over. I label the patterns and we are essentially done. It's now time to cut the pattern, and I went ahead to add seam allowance to the waistline. I cut the remaining excess and we are done. I did test the pattern for any adjustment that needed to be made, and for some reason the pants don't get to my natural waist. I do have a bit of a butt, so I may have to increase the crotch depth next time. But for now, I'm going to adjust the waist to where the pants ends at the waist. And I needed to take the hips in as I rounded the hips too much, so I needed to adjust that as well. I highly recommend you testing your pattern as well with a muslin fabric, because trousers or pants can be tricky. You may need to make different adjustments. I thought I had to move the dots, but it turns out I didn't have to, so I went ahead to erase them and I was done. As it is right now, I am so proud of myself for making this. This is the first time I have made pants that I like. I have attempted drafting pants and it hasn't been to my liking, but this one I am really loving. So I highly recommend. It may seem like it is difficult or complicated, but trust me, it is not. I have made it into a video for you, so it will be easy for you to follow along. Pause the video as many times as you need to understand. Take your time and go through it. I promise you, if you take your time, you will be able to draft your own pattern that fits you so well. This is the best pants I have ever worn. Well, maybe not ever worn, but for the past few years, I haven't found pants that fit me the way this one fits me. We have come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and please do me a favor to hit the like button if you learned something in this tutorial. Let me also know in the comments if you'll be making your own pattern. Also, please know that you can do anything you set your mind to, okay? With that said, have a lovely rest of your day wherever you are. Bye.